Hello, my name is Andrew Gomison, and it gives me great privilege to welcome you to the Culture Watch podcast. This podcast is an outreach of Speaking for Him, and it exists because I believe that we need to have a Christian response to the current events going on around us. I really hope that you enjoy this podcast episode, and that if you do enjoy it, that you will share it with your family and friends. That's how more people find out about what I do here at Speaking for Him, and I would truly appreciate the help. You can find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube for the video version. I'm so glad that you are here today, and before I begin, I just want to do a programming note, and that is that I'm taking the week off from the Culture Watch podcast next week. I will be out of the studio, and so I will be grateful to be back with you in 2 weeks. Please note that the Speaking for Him regular podcast will continue unabated, and I hope that you will continue to listen to both of these podcasts for encouragement on this journey that we call the Christian life, because we know that the Christian life is a marathon and not a sprint, and we need each other. Well, with that being said, let's jump into news for the week of May 11th. All right, well, we're going to start out our news coverage today with some comments from a judge regarding the latest assassination attempt of President Donald J. Trump.
Judge Zia Faruqi has been under the national spotlight for some time now, with critics claiming he prioritizes criminals over the American public. Unbelievable. Hello, everyone. This is Outnumbered. I'm Kayleigh McEnany. Here is my co-host, Harris Faulkner. Also joining us, Molly Hemingway, Fox News contributor, Lisa Booth, Fox News political analyst, and Dr. Mark Siegel, Fox News senior medical analyst, professor of medicine at NYU Langone Health, and author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, The Miracles Among Us: How God's Grace Plays a Role in Healing. While Cole Allen remains in federal lockup, the judge directly addressed him in court, saying this, quote, "What I am to say to Allen, that this is going to be a fair process if we're putting him in a safe cell when he's not supposed to be in there. At a minimum, I should be apologizing to him. We are obligated to make sure he's taken care of. Mr. Allen, I'm sorry that things have not been the way they are supposed to." Now, that apology has U.S. Attorney for D.C. Jeanine Pirro fired up. She posted this: "Welcome to Washington, D.C., where U.S. Magistrate Judge Faruqi believes a defendant armed to the teeth and attempting to assassinate the president is entitled to preferential treatment in his confinement compared to every other defendant." Now, as we noted, this is not the first time that the judge has apologized to a defendant who's openly wanted to kill the president. In September of 2025, he acknowledged to Edward Dana, a man who was charged for what the Justice Department and U.S. Secret Service said was a threat to kill President Trump. Dana spent a week in jail only to have the charges against him dropped. And Faruqi said that the U.S. is past the point of constitutional crisis, as the Trump administration is playing cops and robbers like children. The judge looked at the defendant, who is a person of color, and said that the government's message to people who look like Mr. Dana is to be very afraid, before adding, "I'm afraid right now." Now, U.S. Attorney Pirro sounded the alarm about Faruqi late last year, citing comments made by the judge that a felon's illegal gun possession, quote, "does not necessarily make them dangerous." She said this judge took an oath to follow the law, yet he has allowed his politics to consistently cloud his judgment. How, Lisa Booth, do people like this sit on the bench? I never thought I would hear, "I owe you an apology to a potential assassin."
Well, yeah, because, I mean, we should be focused on deterrence here when we live in this environment of heightened political violence, whether it's three attempted assassination attempts against President Trump, the murder of Charlie Kirk, or even the attempted assassination of Justice Brett Kavanaugh and some of the other justices. So we should be focused on deterrence. I will say with this judge, at least he's been consistent. consistent. He also defended the rights of January 6 defendants as well in 2022. So he at least seems to be consistent across the political spectrum. So maybe not as politically charged here. But this also represents sort of the friction that we've seen with President Trump's Justice Department and Washington, D.C. I mean, we've seen grand juries not go along with some of the charges being brought against people in Washington, D.C. And also in 1 week, we saw 2 defendants had their charges dropped and not move forward who threatened President Trump. So I guess more broadly, I'm concerned about this, this increased heightened political violence that we live in, and judges not doing enough to deter it.
There are so many liberals that will support Hamas, even though they're a known terrorist group who has no mercy. They want to support them over Israel. We've seen them support deported illegal immigrants, even though they are known criminals. The one gentleman that dominated the headlines, I'm forgetting his name right now, but he was a known wife beater. His wife said that he was abusive and he was an illegal immigrant, and he was sent away from America after proving to be a criminal, and people leapt to his aid because they said, this is atrocious that America would treat someone like this. But they did not care one iota for his victims. And so right now, what you are seeing with this particular judge, in this particular instance, is that he is saying that this man who is accused of trying to assassinate the president, and not only is he accused, mind you, but when he attempted to assassinate the president, it was in a room full of people, so there's a lot of witnesses that know that he did what he did. So this isn't a case of he said, she said. This is a case of someone actually doing an egregious action in front of a huge amount of the public. And this judge is saying, I'm sorry for the way that you're being treated. And I know I've mentioned this scripture before here on the podcast, but it always reminds me of the scripture. I believe it's in Isaiah that says, woe unto you who call good evil and evil good. And of course, Jesus will quote this in the New Testament because it's been an issue for all time. As I heard someone say not too long ago in a clip on the internet, he said, people say that things are so evil now, but if you think about it in the right context, you realize that as soon as there was 3 people on the planet, murder came into the story. And so we must not take the belief that things are, in a sense, worse now than they were then, because evil has always been a part of the story. Now, there is a sense in which things are getting worse and worse because the more we turn our back on God, the worse things get, because God is the one who gives us the hope. But I just want you to think about the fact that we live in a world where you can attempt to assassinate the President of the United States, the leader of the free world, and you can get more sympathy than someone who is an actual victim of a crime. You have people that get out of jail from committing one heinous act of violence, and then they go and commit another act of violence, and the leaders that allowed them to get out and do the second thing do not feel the need to be accountable for that. Now, I feel like this is such an important story that I actually pulled two clips for it, and the second clip is going to go into a little bit more detail about what exactly this judge is talking about when he says how this criminal is being treated wrongly.
Yeah, you know, and we need accountability. I see this a lot. Viewers saying, I'm so tired of stories like this. Where's the accountability? And there are people with good ideas. I spoke with Senator Tim Sheehy about the Jail Act, which would allow you to hold judges accountable. It's legislation that could be passed on the Hill. Let's say if the Hill nuked the filibuster. Also, already in place, 28 U.S.C. 631, Molly, allows for the removal of a magistrate judge if, in fact, they show incompetence, misconduct, or neglect of duty. This, to me, is neglect of duty. There's legislation in place already. So it's time for the D.C. judges to get together and get this guy out.
Well, I think it's both incompetence and neglect of duty. I mean, the particulars of this case, the man who attempted to commit mass murder had admitted himself that he was on a suicide mission. He said he expected not to survive. He planned that out. So that a question of whether he was suicidal or not, which is what this judge apologized for. He'd been put in special handling because of his suicidal nature, and he's apologizing for that. Well, when the guy admits and writes a letter to his family saying he expects that this mission will end with his death, it's not even really up for debate. But there are these bigger issues. I mean, first of all, D.C. was horrific for January 6 defendants. It seemed like nobody was caring about the rights of the people who were arrested as part of that mass operation. And we have this situation where the left is in general supporting violence, political violence, and it seems that this judge is part of that. You are absolutely right, Kaylee. There are things that can be done. If a judge is not restoring order, he absolutely should be removed. We have a pretty good Supreme Court. I just wrote a book about one of the justices, Alito. They do seem to care about rule of law. But when you get to those lower federal judges, you start seeing some major problems, or other judges. And the people do get to have a say. If they're not bringing order to the streets, which is one of their primary functions, then they should be removed.
And, you know, this is particularly important because it's about assassinating a president, a would-be assassin. It's also important, though, Dr. Siegel, when you think about the young women out there who have been murdered after guys with 23 priors are released, 40 priors. These judges need to be removed if you're responsible for the murder of a U.S. citizen because you let a guy out of jail.
Let's start right there. Faruqi actually said last year that if you're a felon, you still can carry a gun. You should be able to carry a gun. And that gun could be used against a young woman. So that's number one. To Molly's point about Suicide Watch, absolutely Suicide Watch is mandatory here. If you didn't do Suicide Watch to somebody that says they don't expect to exit the room, that would be medical incompetence. The real point I want to make, though, is the word sedition. What is sedition? Sedition is attempts to overthrow the government and using force to back it up. So this is sedition. It isn't just an assassination attempt against the President of the United States. It isn't just shooting an agent who'd be dead right now if he didn't have a vest. It's an attempt to overthrow the government. So with that kind of politics going on, how could you possibly be talking about the rights of the perpetrator here?
So did you listen to that clip? One of the biggest issues that this judge takes with the care of this alleged assassin, and as I said, I use alleged loosely because he tried to assassinate the president in a room full of people. So this is kind of a foregone conclusion. You know, a lot of times when cases are adjudicated, there's not enough evidence or it's circumstantial. This is a case where this man wrote up a manifesto, told people clearly that he was planning to commit suicide in the name of his mission. He was not planning to come out of that room alive. And also, by trying to take down the President of the United States, was guilty of treason, which is the highest crime in the country. And yet we're supposed to somehow take care of this guy with kid gloves and not have him on suicide watch. This is a young man that needs to be held accountable for his actions. Therefore, any effort that our justice system is putting forth to make sure that he lives to see his trial and is held accountable for those actions is something that should be taken. I don't understand why we allow these people who have been so clearly guilty of such egregious acts to be treated as if they are victims. This man is not a victim. This man clearly planned out a strategy for what he was going to do. Then he circumvented security and was able to get into the room with the president, and he was able to take shots. And apparently he hit a Secret Service man who is only alive today because he wore his vest. So I think it's absolutely ridiculous that we're talking about this young man not receiving the right treatment. Now, obviously, in the U.S., we believe in humane treatment. Obviously, if he was really being beaten or if he was being abused in prison, we should care about that, and we should not want that to stand or occur. That is obvious. But that's not this. This is a young man being held to account for his actions and being treated in accordance with his own declarations, the most important of which is that he came into this goal of taking out the president with a suicidal mindset, with a willingness to end his life if it would make his goal of eliminating the president happen. And this is something that needs to be taken seriously, and I'm glad that we have law enforcement officials who are doing just that. We need to stop pussyfooting around these issues. We need to stop putting the criminal above the victims, and we need to see that justice is done. During President Trump's first term, there were so many threats against him that were not taken seriously. Cory Booker said that he wanted to punch Trump in the face. There was a Hollywood celebrity, and again, I'm not remembering her name, but she said, I wish sometimes that I could blow up the White House. And, of course, the easiest thing for these people to do, in their minds at least, is to later backtrack and say they were joking. Of course, I'm not sure if they did in either of these cases, but I know it does happen. People say, well, I was joking, so you can't take me seriously. But we need to take these things seriously. You cannot threaten the highest elected official in our country and get away with no consequences. And particularly if this young man actually did shoot a Secret Service agent, he needs to be held accountable for that. And if he tells people that he's suicidal, then he needs to be on suicide watch. There should be no reason why that would not be an expectation. Well, if you've been listening to this show for any length of time, or my regular Speaking for Him podcast, you know that issues related to the sanctity of human life are very high on my list of priorities when I come to you behind this microphone. And this past week, I ran across a clip from a representative, Brandon Gill, from Texas. And apparently he was grilling an abortion provider who was testifying on Capitol Hill. And I ran across a video of Josh Howerton talking about this video and also sharing clips from it. So I want to share Josh's perspective because his perspective mirrors mine about this very important issue.
Calling abortion healthcare is like calling rape lovemaking or like calling slavery job creation. Watch what a seared conscience looks like, and then I want to show you how Satan does this real quick.
You're an advocate for abortion policy. What's your favorite type of abortion?
I am an advocate for patients having access to the full realm of reproductive health care.
Pause. Now, real quick, I want to show you a few things. Did you notice she's like, I don't call it abortion, I call it reproductive health care. Here's how Satan creates a seared conscience in somebody. So the Bible says Satan's the father of lies. One of the ways he lies is he packages evil things as good and packages good things as evil. You're going to see this constantly. Whoever controls the terms wins the debate. Hey, I don't want to call it abortion. I definitely don't want to call it murder. Let's package something evil in a good term. We're going to call it reproductive health care.
Do you have a preferred method of abortion that you like?
I do not.
Brace yourself.
Let me read through a couple different methods. First type is called a suction abortion. The cervix is dilated and a strong suction, 29 times the power of a household vacuum cleaner, tears the baby's body apart and sucks it through the hose into a container. Do you prefer that method?
Watch her face.
I stand by my former testimony.
We'll keep watching her
That
face.
sounds kind of gross,
You
doesn't
can't
it?
look at him.
Sounds pretty gruesome. Do you agree?
This is going to be hard to listen to. Here's what he's doing that's brilliant. He's tearing the mask off what the father of lies has covered an evil thing in a good term and forcing you to deal with the moral reality of what's actually happening.
This one is called dilation and curettage. After dilation of the cervix, a sharp looped knife is inserted into the uterus. The baby's body is cut into pieces and extracted, often by suction. Do you prefer that method?
What I believe we are here to talk about
She can't
today is
acknowledge
the
it.
FACE Act.
That's a seared conscience. Keep watching.
I am access to reproductive health care advocate.
Whoever controls the terms wins the debate.
You don't want to talk about abortion itself. Why is that?
I would prefer to talk about the reason that the committee called the hearing.
Is it because
She's doing everything in her power to make sure the reality of what's happening is not stated. Why? Because that's what the father of lies does. Let me hide the evil and package it with a sanitized good term. Reproductive health care. Keep going.
dilation and evacuation? Forceps are inserted into the uterus, grabbing and twisting the baby's body to dismember him or her. If the head is too large, it must be crushed in order to remove it. Do you prefer that method?
I would prefer to talk about the reason the hearing was called and the basis of my expert testimony.
Keep watching her face.
It's uncomfortable to hear this, isn't it? How about this one? It's when a 20% salt solution is injected through the mother's abdomen into the baby's amniotic fluid. The baby's skin is burned off. Baby ingests the solution and dies of salt poisoning, dehydration, and hemorrhaging of the brain. Do you prefer that method?
I stand by my prior testimony.
I wouldn't want to talk about this either if I were you, because it is barbaric and evil.
That is a seared conscience, and I will just say one thing. Proverbs 8:36. All who hate me love death. Calling
Brandon Gill is a hero. And I want to urge all of the Republican representatives and senators who are on the Hill right now, especially those who claim to be pro-life and claim to be Christians and followers of Jesus, to be willing to speak about abortion in these terms and to be willing to uphold life at its earliest stages in these terms. Because all of my life, I have heard people say, in one way or another, I am pro-life. And they try to appeal to the conservative base by having all the right answers as far as that goes. I believe that life begins at conception. I believe that life is valuable. But when you are willing, as Brandon Gill was, to talk about the barbosity, the barbaric nature of abortion in the terms that he was, you make it real. Because as Josh Howerton so artfully relates in this clip, the biggest victory that the pro-abortion movement has is by controlling the terms and making abortion sound like a sanitized version of American healthcare, when in fact it is the ripping from limb to limb of an unborn child. Now, the sad thing is that we are living in a new reality in the pro-life fight, and that is that the abortion pill has come front and center. And I recently heard that the majority of abortions in America are now taking place via the abortion pill. And it is even less regulated in a lot of ways than other forms of abortion. And abortion as a whole was already one of the least regulated industries in the United States of America. So we have a lot to pray about and a lot to continue to educate people on. But I will continue to fight for life. And I urge you, my listener, to fight for life as well. Fight for life by speaking out for life, but also fight for life in the way that you embrace children yourself. Do you, as a believer, truly believe that children are a heritage from the Lord and the fruit of the womb is his reward? If you do, then make sure people know that. Make sure people know that the reason that you are having children, the reason that you desire a larger family, is because you believe that these children that the world calls an inconvenience are actually a blessing. I'll never forget, a few years ago now, I had the privilege of going to an advanced screening of the movie Unplanned, which was the story of Ashley Johnson, who was a prominent abortion provider until God got a hold of her and she left the pro-choice movement and then later committed her life to Christ. And as a result of leaving, she started an organization for people that wanted to leave abortion clinics to help them get out of the industry and find different work. And when I sat and watched the advanced screening of that and was actually the co-sponsor of an event where a local church that I have spoken at yearly for the last several years, True Life Bible Church, bought up a bunch of screenings of this movie and gave away free tickets to whoever wanted them to see this life-changing movie. But I'll never forget sitting in that special screening before this event took place and hearing Judge Randy Heckman, who was a judge here in Michigan and a solid conservative voice, say that it was not enough to take a pro-life stance, but that it's important for us to have pro-life hearts. Because if you look at the reason why Christians limit their family size, and you look at the reason why people have abortions, often the reasonings are the same. It's not a convenient time to have more children. I can't afford more children. But who is really providing for your children? Is it really you, or is it really God? My dad raised me with the idea that God pays for what he delivers. And I want to encourage you as you're listening today that God does pay for what he delivers, and that God will always provide for those who do his will and uphold his principles. And his principle is to suffer the little children to come unto me, for of such are the kingdom of heaven. And so if we want to truly change the narrative on abortion, if we want to truly change the abortion industry and toss it on its head, the thing that is most needed is that you and I will truly embrace children for the blessings that they are, And if the world sees that we truly embrace children, not just before they're born, because that's the common myth, is that pro-lifers only care about children before they're born. Of course, I know that's not true. I can point to myriad examples of how that's not true, but we need to make sure that we're continuing to dispel that myth, because it is a myth, and for some people, it's hard for them to get past. But if we as the church can show the value of children, and if we can speak out with boldness about the true barbaric nature of abortion, we can truly see a change in this area. And a change that goes far beyond just putting a legislation in place to limit abortion, as great as that is. I've heard people say that the goal of the pro-life movement should not be to make abortion illegal. The goal of the pro-life movement should be to make abortion unthinkable. And I think that's a far better way to think about that. Well, for this week's dose of inspiration here on the Culture Watch podcast, I wanted to share with you this clip from a comedian that I ran across this week, and he actually had a very interesting perspective on the marriage vows. And his name, I believe, is Ali Siddiq.
To have and to hold. Do y'all know I just found out what to have and to hold meant this summer? I've been married 27 years, and I just found out this summer what to have and to hold mean. I take care of my grandmother. My grandmother, 94 years old. And, okay, yeah, I was 94, yeah. Take care of my grandmother, and I came home one Sunday off the road. I like to get back on Sundays. And she calls, and she says, Mark, that's what she called me, Mark. I said, yeah, what's up, Granny? Something's wrong with my washer. I said, Granny, what's wrong with it? It ain't working. I said, that's my fault, stupid question. Okay. So because I don't have patience, because I don't have a whole lot of time, I don't want all these different people in and out my 94-year-old grandmother's home. I get right up and I run to this appliance store in Houston called Conn's. I'm in Conn's because I'm just about to get a new one. I don't want to, have to mess around with this old thing. I'm about to get a new one. And so I'm in Conn's, and I'm looking, I'm pricing, and I call my granny. I say, Granny, what color is your washer? My grandmother said, brown. I see white, black, silver. I don't see no brown. I said, Granny, how long y'all had that washer? She said, oh, we got it in 78. I said, and it just broke? She said, no, it gave us a problem a time or two, but your pawpaw had it under warranty with Sears and Roebuck. Then my grandmother said, but why are you at Conn's appliance store? I said, Granny, because you told me the washer broke. She said, nah, ain't nothing wrong with it. It just need to be fixed. You around here thinking something wrong with her. You around here thinking something wrong with him. But according to my granny's theology, ain't nothing wrong with them. They just need to be fixed. We are living in a generation that's good at having and horrible at holding. We good at having. The world teach having. You just got an iPhone. Saw a commercial for the iPhone 73. And now you looking at your phone. Look, this old phone here, this is giving me so much fun, this don't even work. You just do what it want to do. You just start talking bad about the father. Because you got to have it. You just got a brand new vehicle. Just got it. Found out they got a new model with one new feature. You know, this one right here got seat warmers in the back. You don't even sit back there. But you gotta have it. Yeah, to have in the hole.
And this man is obviously a comedian, and he's very funny in his delivery. But I thought that was a very astute observation about to have and to hold. And about how it's easy to have things. All we have to do to have something is go out and get it. All we have to do to have a wife or a husband is to have a wedding and marry them. But in order to hold them, in order to sustain a long-term marriage, we have to work at it. Marriage will never be the union of two perfect people. So what's the solution? The solution is that the best marriages are made up of two good forgivers. And of people that aren't going to go looking for someone new when what they really need to do is fix things with the person that they're with. And this is a very important thing for you and I to think about. Just as that granny didn't see the need to replace her washer because she knew that if it got fixed, it would be working fine. So you and I, and the church at large, needs to realize that the solution to problems in marriage is not to throw away the marriage and find someone new. Rather, it's to work on fixing what is wrong with the person that you're with. And some people say, well, I'm having these problems because I married the wrong person. But my conviction is that when you marry someone, they become the right person, because God's goal for marriage is that it would be one woman and one man for a lifetime. And the thing is, there is an exception that allows for divorce. The Bible says that marital unfaithfulness is an exception for divorce. But it's interesting, isn't it, that Jesus says the whole reason that the Jewish leaders allowed for writings of divorcement was because of the hardness of our hearts. That's the first thing I want to say about that particular issue. And the second thing I would say about it is that if marriage is supposed to be the picture of Christ and his church, then if we think about what we have been forgiven and put that into perspective, then we should realize that in a case where marital unfaithfulness does occur, that God can even redeem that and bring restoration to that marriage if the people involved are committed to fixing what is broken. Because here's the deal. I have literally sat in a room and heard someone say that they wish their husband would cheat because then they would have a biblical reason to divorce them. And it doesn't get much more awful than that. So my encouragement to you is, if God has blessed you with a spouse, find 3 things today to be thankful for about them, even if you're struggling. Because you can't be thankful for someone and be angry with them at the same time very easily. Also, if you're praying for someone, it's hard to be angry with them. So think of those three things and write them down. Or better yet, tell the person those three things that you're thankful for. And then, especially if you're struggling, but even if you're not, pray for that person and see how that changes your perspective. We can't change other people in our lives, but we can seek the Lord and ask Him to change us. And when we are changed, the people around us will respond in a different and exciting way. Well, that's all I have to share with you on today's edition of the Culture Watch podcast. Again, as I said earlier, I'll be back in a couple weeks with a brand new episode, and I hope that if you've been benefited by this episode, you will share it with your family and friends and let them know how to listen to this podcast and the Speaking for Him podcast, which will continue uninterrupted. I also hope that you will reach out to me with the contact information that's about to roll with your comments, questions, or concerns. As I always mentioned, I appreciate it when you share it with people who have never heard content from Speaking for Him. So maybe choose 3 to 5 people that would be encouraged by this content. With all this being said, I would like to encourage you to have a great week. And as always, keep serving the best of masters.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Your host has been Andrew Gomison, founder of Speaking for Him. For information on today's show and to leave us comments and voicemails, please visit Speaking for Him. That is speaking numeral 4 him.blogspot.com. You can find Andrew's ministry at speakingforhim.com. That's speaking the number 4 HIM.com. And when you look for us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or all other major podcast platforms, let us know what you think of the podcast by leaving a rating and a review. Intro music for this podcast is provided by Audio Kraken. Transition music is provided by Superstate. Both of these tracks are available free of charge from pond5.com, pond numeral 5.com.